Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Before we get started, I want to be sure to share some housekeeping notes so you'll know how to interact with us today. If you are joining us on Zoom, you'll note that the chat is turned off today. So please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen to ask us any questions. We'll try to answer as many as we can. If you're watching on YouTube, please note that the live chat is turned off. You can go back to the Zoom link and join to ask questions that way. So please just sit back and enjoy the program today. As we get started, we want to start off with thanking our sponsors for today's program, Ohio Poultry Association, VAL-CO Industries, and Grow Next Gen. You will be able to locate our previous virtual field trips as well as this one on grownextgen.org. And so today we are going to learn about engineering inside of a hen house with VAL-CO Industries. To start, we'll do some introductions. So I am Paige Kelly. I am the Environmental and Sustainability Manager at the Ohio Poultry Association. Ohio Poultry Association works with Ohio's egg, chicken, and turkey farmers. And today we are so excited to be here to discuss engineering behind hen housing. We are thankful to have industry experts to help us learn about this topic. I also want to thank Heather Bryan for being with us today. She is on site. She's actually behind the camera, but you may hear from her here and there. So now we're going to go on site. We have Mike Fullenkamp with us. He is a technical support specialist with VAL-CO Industries. Mike, are you there? How are you doing today? Oh, we can't hear you right now, Mike.
Okay. I am good. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now. Thanks for being with us, Mike. We are so excited to have you. Before we get started, can you explain what does VAL-CO do and then talk about your role within VAL-CO?
Okay, so VAL-CO, basically the short answer to that is we produce livestock equipment, anything from the whole house controllers that operate fans, feeders, all that kind of stuff, to the drinkers, the feeders, the fans themselves, the inlets, everything that is needed to operate a commercial poultry building or swine or whatever is required at that point.
Great. And so Ohio is actually second in egg production in the nation. We produce over 10 billion eggs each year. So VAL-CO is a vital part of our industry with supplying producers with their equipment. And so we're going to start off with questions, actually. We have one already from John Keeley. He wants to know, Mike, how long have you been involved in the poultry industry and what was your career pathway to be where you are now?
I've been in the industry for well over 30 years. Don't want to give the exact number because it just shows how old I am. But I actually started in high school in a poultry laying facility, just doing maintenance on weekends and evenings. And then that turned into weekend management and whatever from there. And I've just kind of worked through the industry in the egg side and then I went to the breeder side, was involved with the breeder, and then I moved into the equipment side.
Well, great. We are so excited to have all of your years of experience with us today. And I'm sure you work with many, many people with all types of educational backgrounds, from high school diplomas or bachelor's, master's, or doctorate degrees. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, I've only got a high school degree. My education is from personal experience through the years. Some of my colleagues doing the same job have either an animal science degree or engineering degree, be it mechanical or be it electronical.
Great. Yes, that's one of the great things about the poultry industry is anybody can get involved with any type of background. And so today we are on site at VAL-CO in Coldwater, Ohio. And can you tell us a little bit about what we're looking at? It looks like we're kind of inside of a building that has a barn inside of a barn.
So this barn inside the barn is our training facility. And it's just a small scale replica of something that might be a real life operation. Obviously, because it's small and we try to squeeze more of our product in there than what a normal barn might have. It's a little crowded and you're going to see some things that don't jive together exactly. But basically it's intended for training purposes or sometimes just testing some of our new product lines that we're developing.
Great. So it's almost like a kind of a research barn, but then also, I guess, a show barn. So you can train customers and poultry producers kind of on a smaller scale. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Awesome. Well, we can go ahead and get started. I know you're going to show us some really cool stuff today. So tell us what we're looking at right here, and then we will work through this field trip.
Okay. So we are going to start with what is considered a tunnel curtain opening. We've got the tunnel curtain, which raises and lowers by the whole house controller based off of temperature, humidity, and all those kinds of factors. Just works on a simple cable system, raises and lowers. This over here on the side is to help seal it up. So if it is closed, that the wind doesn't get behind the curtain. You've got that on both ends. And then there's a counterweight on the end. So whenever it does go up and down, the system goes up evenly instead of the heavy weight closest to the mechanism that's bringing it up and down. Just keeps everything evened out and level.
Great. So this is important to protect birds when it's cold outside and you can open it to give them air when it is warm outside, correct?
Correct. Just for simplicity, I'm not going to run it automatically, but there's a hand winch in here where you can raise and lower the system. And it's basically the same deal as if it's running with the machine, which is hanging on the wall here beside us.
Great. And so if this were a full-size barn with birds in it, this opening would kind of run the entire length of the barn. Is that right?
For a tunnel opening, it would probably just be on like the end third of the barn because we want to pull the air from the one end and get wind speed. So we have wind chill factors when the air is coming across the animals.
Okay. That's good to know.
So this is tunnel. If it's the length, if the curtain is the length of the barn, that's considered natural ventilation. And that's just where you're using the natural breeze outside to exchange the air through the barn.
Okay. All right. Yep. So what else do we have back there to help us with controlling air exchange and making sure that the birds have good ventilation?
Yep. We will work our way around the barn here. Just showing you some of our fans. This is just a small 24-inch fan. We do not have the fan cone mounted on the system at the moment. A fan will move a certain amount of air, but when you add that cone on, because of the airflow and the way that works, it actually moves more air by having the cone on it than without the cone on it. And then we'll go around the back side of the barn, and because of it being a training facility, some things aren't completely put together sometimes. So this is just a standard fan, sidewall fan, moving air. There is no cone on it at the moment. And then we go into our fiberglass sidewall fan with the cone. And then there's always the safety equipment is added to the end, so animals or people cannot get into the fan while it's running. So this is our fiberglass, and if we can make our way around, and we've got a galvanized sidewall fan. Same scenario, it's just made out of different material. The fiberglass is pretty much a lifetime warranty. Metal will rust at some point over time with the harsh environments that we deal with sometimes.
Great. And so we just saw some great visuals of what fans look like on actual barns and all the different sizes. And it looks like you guys have a lot of options for producers to pick from. You have metal fans, you have kind of the plastic fans, and all different types of sizes. So do you help producers choose what's best for their facility?
We have an application engineering group that will help walk people through what will be best for their scenario, size-wise, numbers of fans, and those kinds of things.
Great. I'm sure that's really, really great for our producers to have those resources. And as we're working around the corner here, I think we're going to run into some other equipment. So what do you have here, Mike?
Yep. So here is just one of our smaller feed bins. This is a 6 foot 2 ring bin. It's basically going to store the feed for the animals. And on this system, we actually have a scale system. So every leg has a load cell underneath it. And then on the wall right over here, we have the display. So it shows how much weight is in that bin currently.
What kind of animal feed, Mike, do birds eat? So is this a mixture of different grains that would be in this bin?
Every age bird, breed of bird is going to take a little different ration, but it's mainly going to be corn and soybeans with some other additives, minerals, vitamins added to the mix.
Great.
Great.
So I'm sorry, Paige, for interrupting. But soybeans are a great way for birds to get a protein source.
Absolutely.
Right, as well as corn with their energy source. So those two grains work really well together to raise healthy birds.
Yep, and we are seeing some great visuals of an example of an egg mash diet there. So that would be an example of a feed that we are feeding layers, and that would be in that feed bin right there. And we're moving it along. And so, Mike, as you're walking, you talked a little bit about that weight system. So is it important for producers to be able to track that data and be able to understand how much their birds are eating and how much food is in there?
Yes, absolutely. Everything is based off of the ration, the feed ration that they're using is all based off of how much the birds are eating. So if the birds are eating a lot of feed and they're getting too much nutrient, just like us people, if we eat too much, we gain too much weight. So they want to control that. So they won't necessarily take the amount of feed that the birds are getting, but they'll put more fillers in so there's not getting too much nutrient in the feed.
One of the questions I have, Paige, because we're on the outside of the barn, is a little bit about the security, the features that we're seeing outside of the barn here. So I see that on many of the windows, as well as up in the eaves, there is netting or some kind of a wire mesh. Why is this here, Mike?
That is 100% to keep wild birds from getting into the barn, or wild animals. It shouldn't limit it just to birds, because all those wild animals, even though they're healthy out in the wild, carry certain diseases that they're immune to. And if they would get into the barn, it could spread disease. And that's the worst thing that could happen to those animals inside the barn.
Yeah. And so I think that's a feature of biosecurity. And at the beginning, we kind of saw you step into a foot bath there. That's another feature of biosecurity. So it looks like you guys are doing a lot to keep the birds safe and healthy.
Yes. And, even on that biosecurity, that foot bath, even here in our plant, in our office, in order to get into the plant or even into our office, you have to go through a foot bath because we have so many different people that we work with. And feet is the best or the biggest cause of spread of things as far as when it comes to the human touch to the animal.
Okay, awesome. Good to know.
So this is another large fan.
Yep. So this is a 36-inch sidewall fan. It's a direct drive. So it could be variable speed if it needed to be, just to adjust the amount of airflow that it's pulling. And then we come up to what we call our cool pad system. And this is just a water reservoir with a pump down inside it. And when the barn gets too warm, it'll kick this pump on and it'll cycle water through this, what is truly actually just a cardboard material. So that cardboard soaks up all that water. And then as the air pulls through, it'll evaporate that water and actually cool the air. So if it's 90 degrees outside, under the right circumstances, it could only be 75 or 80 degrees inside just from using this evaporated cooling system.
Wow, that is really cool. And so we're seeing a lot of, I guess, like squiggles on that cardboard. So what is all that for? Why is it all wavy and everything? Does that help with anything?
Yeah, so the waviness is just literally so the water gets across the entire thing. If it was straight, it would just go in streaks down there and you'd have dry spots and wet spots. So you want the wave to it, and you can't tell it. You're not going to be able to see it on film here, but unfortunately, all of these waves actually have like a tunnel. So it drops in from the top and it drops in and it goes to the outside of the cardboard. So when the fans are running and pulling the air in, it's pulling that water back through the dry part of the cardboard to help it evaporate.
Okay.
And then if you can see, most of what you see here is basically a brown color. We do have a section here that's black, and that's just it's kind of a plasticky, and I don't have the official description of it, but it just hardens the surface, because all water, no matter where you source it from, you're going to get water scale, and it's going to get hard water buildup, per se, on the system. And with the black, you can actually come here and treat it and brush it off and not damage the cardboard as easily as you would on the brown section.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure birds love a cool breeze on a nice warm day. So that's really important to keeping the birds comfortable. And so it looks like we're going to be kind of walking inside this show barn here in a minute. We're following you, Mike. And so we've talked about ventilation, we've talked about air, we've talked about food, and we actually had a question from Kristen Dices on what are the three main components needed to build a chicken coop. And we've already gone through a lot, but I think three main of them would be, one of them being air, one of them being feed, and then here you are at one system, but eventually we're going to get to water too as well. Show barn, and we are going to show our visuals here of actual poultry facilities with drinker lines. And Mike, if you could talk us through that. I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but on our screen, we can see a drinker line and the birds are kind of pecking at what looks like to be a nipple. Can you go through that and what that means and why that's important? What's happening right there?
So is what you're seeing right there in that video is the birds are drinking, and the key to the birds drinking is above their head height, so you want to reach up at like a 45-degree angle, because a bird truly doesn't swallow. If you've seen birds out in a backyard flock or whatever, you'll see them. They go into a pan of water, do a little bit, and then their head goes up. So they're filling their mouth, and then they raise their head so the water goes down their throat. So that's our design is with these nipple drinker system, is to get it so the birds are getting the water at a 45 degrees, so they don't have to take that time to fill their mouth and drain it down their throat. They're automatically getting that water where they need it to right off the bat.
Okay, great. And these are automatic water lines, correct? So the birds have access to these 24/7 and can drink as much as they want, it looks like. And then I know VAL-CO has done a great job of trying to make sure that there aren't any leaks in the water, because that can be harmful to the hen's health and their overall bodies. Is that correct? So what do these nipples do to help decrease water loss and keep the birds happy and healthy?
So the way that these work is it's a ball and a trigger pin, and there's a flow pin actually in there that controls how much water comes through the drinker, and as they trigger it is allowing them to drink the water, and that ball helps seat that bottom trigger pin and close off the water flow. That's the whole key. You want to keep that water only going into the birds instead of it getting spilled onto the floor and causing wet litter.
Okay, very interesting. So it seems like there are a lot of details into hen housing that people may not have ever thought of, all the way down to the water system. And is there anything else that you want to highlight? We can see it pretty good right now with the water system before we move on.
So just a brief summary is we've got on the wall, we had a big regulator dropping down to 20 PSI. And here we've got our line regulator, and we're actually below 1 PSI for the drinker system to operate.
So Mike, really quickly, when we think about PSI, what does that mean to students when they hear about like from 20 to 1? How does that help you to get the water to the birds?
So if you would supply 20 psi, which is 20 pounds per square inch, that puts too much pressure on the trigger pin for the birds to be able to activate it. It's holding it closed. So by dropping it down to less than 1 psi, it keeps the line full of water, but without virtually any pressure at all.
And then,
So,
Mike, we have a question from Jill Chase before we move on. So do people who use this nipple water system have to train the birds how to get the water, or are the birds able to naturally find it on their own?
For the most part, birds are extremely curious, but whenever you start it out, if you start with a day-old chick, training them how to drink out of the system, instead of, like I said earlier, where you want it just above their head height, we're going to have it low enough so they're bumping their head on it. And then we lower the pressure enough so we just get a ever so much of not necessarily a drip off of it, but where the water forms a drip on the trigger pin so the birds can see that water. And as soon as one bird finds it, the entire barn full of birds will find it, because they're telling all their friends, hey, this is where to go.
Awesome. Okay. What do we have next here?
So we're going to step over to what we call our fuse pan feeding system. And this is basically an auger system where the auger brings the feed in from the bin that was outside, fills our hopper here, and then as the birds eat out of the pans along here, the very end pan has a switch in it that whenever that switch gets exposed that there's not enough feed in there, it'll turn this auger on and automatically refill all of those pans. And depending on the age of the birds, we can adjust the height on that pan on how deep of a feed pad is inside that pan. So if they're older birds, you don't want a lot of feed in there because they'll just drag it out and waste it. But if they're, baby day-old chickens, they need a real thick pad so they can find it and be able to do their natural thing on eating and scratching through it and things.
Okay, so that looks like it's one example of a feeding system that producers use. And then I think we have some footage of some other feeding systems, and you're about to go through kind of a layer aviary system here. Before you get started, can you touch on the feeding system there?
Yep, we'll step across to the other side of the room here and show you another type of feeder. And this is our flat chain feeder. This is probably one of the first major feed systems that was ever developed. And it's just a feed trough that's basically a U with a piece of chain that drags around and pulls the feed all the way around to make it accessible to the chickens.
Okay, great. So that can be used in cage-free housing and caged housing. And it looks like you are about to go over hen housing here as well. So we'll let you take it away.
Okay, so then I'm gonna step over to our what is considered more of a cage-free laying facility nest. It's our free community nest. And basically we've got it so the birds can come in here. They've got a nest pad, and then they can go in there. They can have their privacy behind the curtain to go lay their eggs, because the chickens typically don't want to lay an egg and everybody be able to see what's going on. It's kind of like needing your privacy at those special times of the day. So,
and it looks really dark in there.
Double stack.
Go ahead, Mike.
Nope. This is our flat top system. We've also got what we call a shingle top system, and I'll be able to open that up so you can see inside a little bit better. So this is our shingle top system. So we've still got our curtains on. This is our expeller panel. So the birds would be in there laying their eggs, and then at the end of the day, after they're done laying eggs, we don't want them to stay inside of that nest all night long, because they're going to defecate and relieve themselves wherever they're resting. So at the end of the day, we're going to have the system come on and it's going to pull this closed and basically tell the birds that they need to find someplace else to rest. That way it keeps the eggs clean for the consumers in the grocery stores.
Great. And so can you give us some perspective? So after the hen lays the egg, whenever the producer is ready, what happens to that egg afterwards? It looks like we're kind of have a slope there. So does the egg roll down and then get collected?
So in this system, there's a slope on the nest pad, and then it's going to roll back into the back of the nest, and it's going to roll into an egg belt, onto an egg belt. And then in most cases, 2 or 3 times a day, the farmers are going to run that egg belt and pack those eggs and get them into a cooler. Normally, the majority of your eggs are going to be on that first run in the morning, just because it's natural for the chickens to want to lay eggs first thing in the morning, a couple hours after the sun comes up or the lights come on, however you want to phrase that.
Awesome. Great. Thank you for explaining that. That was really helpful.
Okay, so then we've got another nest system right over beside us, and it can be used in all types of chickens. These nests can be used in all different scenarios. It's a personal preference when it comes down to what nest system that farmer or that integrator is going to use for their system or setup that they prefer to use. So this is considered our side belt nest system. And this section here is actually our comfort nest. So it's got a larger opening here, and there's actually room. There's 3 chickens can get in each hole here and lay an egg at the same time. And then this pipe here just keeps the birds, if they do pile in too many, so they're not laying an egg and it flies out the front of the nest. And then once the birds lay their eggs, it'll roll to the outside on this system onto a much narrower belt. And that's where you're going to run your eggs, run the eggs off of the system more often, because you have less room for the eggs versus the other system that we just looked at. That belt is 19 inches versus this one being 4 inches. But then when we go down the line, so this is one of our newer versions of this system. This is what has been our standard for a lot of years. So these are half the size of what the ones that we previously looked at. So you can only get 1 chicken in each hole at a time, unless they want to double stack themselves.
Okay, so these are all types of nest box systems, Mike, and you kind of said that this is the older system and then you have some newer systems. So why are the systems changing, and why are you guys constantly working to improve those systems?
Yes. So the industry is changing. This was the old standard, and like I said, 1 chicken can fit in that nest hole at a time. So we take the exact same size of a nest from the length of the system. So this is 8 feet long, and so is this. This is also 8 feet long, but by taking every other partition out, we've actually added 5 extra birds per side, to be in the nest at one time. It's just something that has evolved over time, that we've realized what the chickens like. It's not necessarily all about what we want to do, because the chickens want to do what they want to do, and nobody has taught the chickens how to read so they know how to use the system.
Yeah, it's great. And part of this is consumer preference as well. So this allows consumers to be able to choose different types of eggs in the store, the ones that they want. So you're also listening to consumers as well as the birds' needs, and making sure that they're happy and healthy however they are raised. And then, so while we're on this topic, before we move on, so we have a question from Ellen Harrington. So is egg laying production slower at any time of the year? And we haven't talked too much about lighting, but maybe you can answer this, Mike, since we are in a barn.
Yes. So naturally, egg production is going to be slower during the winter months than they are during the summer months, just because of day length. That it's the natural thing built into the birds. The shorter the day, the less they want to lay the eggs. But in these scenarios, what we're looking at, what we use here is we use our whole house controllers or whatever to control when the lights come on for the birds. So it's when the sun comes up, when the sun goes down. We can do a straight on. We can do it so it comes on just the same as if it's the sun coming up. We go from nothing and just gradually to where the sun's fully shining, as far as a replication of so. So by having things that we can control how much light is in the barn, we can control keeping those birds wanting to lay eggs as much as possibly as they can.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Hopefully that answered her question appropriately. And so now that you're standing over by this control panel that you mentioned, it looks like a lot of technology happening here, and many people don't realize how much technology is involved in agriculture. So can you explain kind of what we're looking at and what all you have there?
So this one here is our Ventra XT, which is a touchscreen, and we can navigate different places. So we can go on here and look at what device we're wanting to do, and we can go in there and do different settings. But then we've got our switch, so we can manually turn it on, put it in an off position, or put it in automatic so the controller does its thing. So we're looking at temperature, we're looking at humidity, we're looking at several things, and that's what tells the computer basically what we want to do at what point. And then we've got our Ventra Plus, which is the generation before the XT, which has a much smaller screen, but it still has pretty much the same functionality. It's just the XT has become a little more user friendly because we can see so many more lines on the screen at a time than just the 2 lines we can here. And then we've got Agri Alert controllers. So it's this control is really just a dialer system. So if one of these controllers is running everything and it says, hey, it's too hot in here and I can't fix it, it's going to tell this device to, hey, call the owner so they come and take care of whatever the problem is.
Right. And we talked about that when I was there on site too, that producers sometimes have this information on their phone, and these systems are connected to their phone. So they're able to access them at any time. And that kind of goes into Abigail Waldron-Flavin's question. So how are stressed birds monitored and cared for? And it sounds like this is one system that can tell producers that birds may be stressed due to heat or air or feed or water. And so this will tell the producer that something's wrong.
Correct. So these are, like you said, they can go on their smartphone and look right into the barn from where they could be a mile down the road, or they could be clear across the country, and they can pull it up on their phone and look at what's going on. Which is a huge advantage to what things used to be. But I'm going to throw in there's nothing like visually seeing what's going on as well. So, even though things are advancing, there's nothing truly replaces the personal touch out there in the barn to make sure everything is okay.
That's a great point, Mike. And we have some visuals right now of a producer walking through their barn to just make sure everything's okay and see how her hens are doing. And I'm sure producers are doing that multiple times a day, because technology can fail, right? So we don't want to rely on it all the time. And then we had one. Go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead. That's the whole point of having this dialer system. So whenever the controller knows that there's a problem, that it's a backup system to make sure everything is being covered and the health of the birds and the safety of the birds is being taken care of.
Great. And so as you're kind of moving on, we do have one more question in the Q&A from June Wed. So do you know how many eggs a chicken lays each day on average? Mike, what do you think a chicken will lay every single day?
The right answer is technically 1 egg a day, and it depends on the stage of their life. It's going to actually be less than 1 egg a day, but 1 egg a day is a pretty standard answer. There is an exact calculation out there that some of these breeds has that, at times they'll get more than an egg a day. but when you average it out, it's 1 egg a day.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Mike. So we have about 5 minutes left. What components are we missing over here that you're standing by now?
So this is a sister product basically to what we showed you when we first started as that tunnel curtain on the other side of the barn. So this is just a tunnel door. So the curtain just goes up and down. That's all it does, and allows air to go through. So this is a door. So there's some insulation value. The curtain virtually has no insulation value. It just stops the air from moving. So the door has insulation value, and it'll seal up against the framework. So we actually, during extreme cold weather, we can control the temperature inside the barn a little easier. And that works the same as far as whenever the controller says it's too hot, it's going to open up, but this is going to swing open instead of just going up and down. So it'll swing down and then it'll swing back up. So if the controller's running it, it's going to come down and open up. And it only comes open so far, so you don't have to worry about the birds getting in behind it. And then whenever it closes up, it'll go back closed, seal everything off. And this is just for reference sake, this is the opposite side of that cool pad system that we looked at from the outside of the barn. So this is where that cooler air is going to pull through because of the evaporative system out on the outside wall.
Okay, awesome. So just another way to control ventilation and showing how important ventilation is to keep birds happy and healthy.
So one of the last things probably that we have to share is this is a tube heater that is used mostly for like when you get baby day-old chicks in a barn. They need to be kept warm. Depending on the breed, that temperature is going to vary a little bit, but somewhere in that 90 to 95 degrees is what that chick needs to be able to be comfortable, because they don't have any feathers. They've got a little fuzz, but it doesn't hold their body temperature in. So they need supplemental heat. And in nature, they're just going to hang with their mother and tuck in underneath her whenever they're cold. Well, that's not the scenario here. So we're going to supplement heat with, and in most cases anymore, we're using tube heaters, and that gives the length of the tube heater, which varies. But if you're 6 feet in the air, that's going to give you a spread of a little over 12 feet of heat underneath it based on the reflector on top. So if you're only if it's hanging 4 feet, you're only going to have 8 feet. So there's variables in there on how much heat space that we want to be able to keep those chicks comfortable. And then you want to have spaces where they can get out of that direct heat if they're getting too hot. And then
Okay, great. And so we have one more question before you kind of move on from Doug. This will be the last question of the day. So when you're talking about those evaporating cooling pads, is there a mixing chamber for the air to mix with the water in the cool pads?
So there is what we call a doghouse out there, and I should have showed you that. I apologize. So you've got that cool pad system, and then there's just enough room. It's a narrow hallway basically in between there and that tunnel door, so that air mixes inside of there, and then as it comes into the barn, it's going to do a swirl system, especially with the tunnel doors. It's going to do a swirl and mix with that hot air and pull that hot air out the fan system.
Great. Thank you, Mike. We have about 30 seconds left if you want to touch on that, and then we will wrap it up.
If I can, we've got our Hemisphere fan system here, which just mounts to the ceiling. And this fan, it's just a huge blade that just spins, and it throws that air to the sidewalls, and it just creates like a big mushroom or a roll effect to take that hot air from the ceiling and bring it down to those chicks down on the ground. It's just a way of circulating and mixing the air. That way you don't have hot spots and cold spots.
Great, great. So all of these pieces of equipment are so important to Hen Housing, and we so appreciate, Mike, all of your experience and walking us through all the details behind engineering and a Hen Housing. So thank you so much, Mike, for being there with us. Thank you to VAL-CO for sponsoring this field trip, and we greatly appreciate everybody attending.